This presentation, I want to be very clear, is not about certain things because I want to make this about you. So this presentation is not going to be about facts and figures. It's not about anatomy and physiology. I'm not going to fill you with caregiver facts or a lot of statistics. I want to get right to the heart of what's going on, what this disease is doing to you as a caregiver. Dementia and Alzheimer's disease affects the entire family, and I think sometimes this is forgotten. We think about the disease affecting the person who's been diagnosed, but we fail to recognize that it affects husbands, wives, children, grandchildren, friends, siblings, any member of the family or associated friends and relatives are affected by this disease. And I think this is something we need to take seriously and talk about. Every single patient, every resident is unique, and every caregiver is unique. We are all challenged by this disease and the associated behaviors that we see accompanying the process of the disease. I think that the most important thing for me to tell you is how overwhelmed I am, even as an instructor, in regards to caregiver challenges. And on Saturday, I came into the office to work a little bit on putting together these slides for this presentation. And I happened to get on a chat board that was going on with caregivers. On that one day, in 17 minutes, the message board for caregivers had these things pop up that said, 3 minutes ago, 2 minutes ago, 0 minutes ago. And the message board for caregivers included topics like, my siblings won't help, I can't take it anymore, my brother is being treated like a king, I don't want to hear you're praying for me. That one actually had very interesting answers. I don't want mom living with me anymore, and how do I help my mother and deal with my father's verbal abuse? These were just a few topics, and I went back on yesterday to look at it to see how much this had expanded, and I was just overwhelmed. So the need is there, and it's for basic knowledge, basic understanding, and more than anything, help for the caregiver and the challenges that they have. So many people will say to me, can you suggest some good reading material? And I can. This happens to be a wonderful book, The 36-Hour Day. If I were to tell you that I have a list of about 30 good books to read, and I'm willing to share them with you and tell you what they are, but I have a question back for people when they ask me this. And that question is, do you have time with all you're going through to read the book? And so I hope that what we can do is begin to put together a series for you all to understand what comes out of this reading material, what is out of research, and what other people are dealing with to help you in short periods of time to realistically deal with some of the behaviors and understand your own reactions. So what can I do for you? Well, I wish that I could do more, and I think that's what this slide is about. If you see the researcher, I wish that I could solve the problem of this disease. So does the Alzheimer's Association. So do all researchers that are involved in this study. We wish we had an answer so that none of us had to go through this, the resident or the family caregivers. I wish I had enough money to give to you to offer you the respite, the help with medication, all the care that's needed, and to take care of you. I wish there was a pill that I could give to make it all better. I wish I could give you time in your life. And I wish more than anything else, because I know that the other things are not possible, that I could come help you with the care. But it's not realistic. So the real question is, what can I do for you that I can realistically do and make happen? And that is, I hope that I can put a different frame today on some of the things that you are dealing with. It's really interesting, and I encourage you to think about this whenever something's going on in your life. But if you can reframe something, and they always use that topic, but I wonder, what does that mean? Until I really started thinking about when you put something in a picture frame, it takes on a different meaning. You can look at a beautiful picture that's framed in a bad frame, and it doesn't look near as neat. I have to tell you, when you see something that is not always the best, but a gorgeous frame, it can become amazing. So we're going to talk about reframing for a minute. And what are the topics we're going to talk about? Behaviors, caregiver feelings, communication, and also our expectations, not only of the residents or our family members, but of ourselves. Expectations, understanding the disease. What are you looking for? I think instead of talking about dementia for 1 minute, I want to talk to you about something I use a lot when I'm training with new employees that are coming in to work in a long-term care facility. Some of these folks have never, ever been involved with anybody who's had dementia. They might be working in the dining room. They might be a groundskeeper. They just don't understand this disease. So I try to put this into a perspective of what do they understand. Most of us have heard about epilepsy. Many of us have seen someone have a seizure. And as a nurse, if I saw someone have a seizure and I were to look at them as they were seizing on the floor and stop and say, stop that. You need to stop that. Or I would turn to someone else and say, they didn't do that yesterday. I don't know why they're doing that now. He didn't do this morning. He only does this for attention. Quit biting your tongue. You would think I was a horrible nurse. That's because most of us understand that with epilepsy, this person has no control over what has happened to their brain. They have no control over the seizural activity of their body. And yet, when someone with dementia presents with behaviors, we want them to stop it. We don't understand it. Many early cases, we don't identify it. And these folks look exactly like we do, walking and talking normally 1 minute, and the next minute they can be having some type of gibberish talk. They can be talking to us and making no sense. They can be asking the same question they just asked 5 minutes before, but we would never say to somebody with epilepsy, stop that right now. However, with dementia, many times we don't have the same understanding that we do with the course of other diseases. So I want you to think about when we reframe, if we could put this disease and have our expectations like we would for someone else who has a disease process that we understand better. One of the things I can tell you for sure is that today will not look like tomorrow. We anticipate if yesterday was a good day and Dad could remember where his wallet was, if Dad could remember how to make toast yesterday, why can't Dad do it today? If Dad did it this morning, is he being obstinate because he won't do it this afternoon? Down in the bottom of the slide, it shows the clock. Not only will today not look like tomorrow, the next 10 minutes may not look like this 10 minutes. So these are issues I want you to remember, that with this disease, this is a constantly changing disease, a progressive disease that is ultimately one that we know ends in death. But while we get to this end-of-life situation, we have to go through so many behaviors that are hard for the family member that has the disease or the resident with it, just as hard as it is for you, the caregiver. Primarily today, I want you to know I'm focusing on you, the caregivers. So in order to make change, we have to recognize that we have to change our behaviors. They cannot change theirs. We have to change our behaviors and our responses because they can't. So if we're expecting them to respond to instructions from us, directions from us, we're thinking that if we do the right thing, they will change. That is not the case. We are the ones that have to change. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. This was a wonderful comment or a quote that I saw online from Bob DeMarco, who holds the Alzheimer's reading room. And you can go online and find this yourself, or write me and I'll send you the link to this. But after repeatedly correcting my mother and telling her that she just ate, watching her get frustrated or angry, I finally realized something had to change. And this something was me. I had to change. This was where he was recounting that his mother would eat and 5 minutes later say no one had fed her, she was hungry. Another member of the family would call and she would say that she hadn't eaten all day, and yet this person had just eaten 5 minutes ago. This remark that Mr. DeMarco made, that I had to change, I'm going to be the change agent, is probably the single most important thing you'll take away from this presentation today. I want to tell you a story, and I know that I come to you as a nurse, I come to you as an instructor, a trainer, but I also want you to know I come to you as a daughter of a mother who suffered from dementia. And when we talk about how we interpret a person's behavior is how we respond and how we have to change. We're going to be talking a lot about unmet needs and needs, but I want to start by telling you a story to sort of illustrate this. My mother, when she was diagnosed with dementia, moved in to a assisted living facility first, and then moved to a dementia assisted living. And I made a trip. She was up north of Boston, and my sister was the primary caregiver. And my sister always had a wonderful feeling that my mother had always dressed impeccably, always looked very put together, and she didn't want my mother's appearance changing. She was adamant about that. And my mother would wear wool clothing, like a wool tartan skirt and a lovely wool jacket. And when I would go to visit my mother, I would see my mother tugging at her clothing. And I became very frustrated with my sister and said that this clothing is not appropriate. My mother needs something much more comfortable, something loose, more comfortable material. You know, we talk a lot about the issues that go on with siblings and the primary caregiver. And if you're watching this and you're a caregiver, you know it's very easy for your sister to fly in and make all the great suggestions when you've been dealing with the problems. But this is a great example of what happened. So I see my mother in this wool clothing, and I went out to buy my mother cotton clothes. I bought my mother a cotton blouse, a cotton dress, cotton underwear, cotton slip, and thought, if I could just get her out of the wool, I can make her more comfortable. Interestingly enough, my mother would be tugging all the time on her clothes, tugging and tugging. And that was an indicator to me, looking at this, that she was uncomfortable. But even though I went and bought all the cotton clothing, there was no improvement. My mother continued to tug. I'm in this field. I should know better. It was when I asked a nurse and just thought maybe instead of what her need is, the behavior of tugging on the clothes isn't about the material. Maybe she's in pain. I asked the nurse if she could possibly give my mother a couple Tylenol. And they did, and I want you to know, in a short period of time, my mother's tugging on her clothing ended. I missed the unmet need that she had, and that was dealing with pain. She had discomfort. So we saw a behavior that looked one way, but it had a different response, and that was to Tylenol, not to clothing. We have to learn that we have to change our interventions all the time. In this case, it worked for my mother throughout. Whenever we saw her tugging on her clothing, this even became part of her service plan or care plan, and the nurses would know she was uncomfortable. This is listening and meeting unmet needs. Just one example. What are some of the needs that residents represent or our family caregivers tell us? Physical discomfort. Physical discomfort can be actual pain. It can be from hot and cold, our environment. It can be from hunger and thirst. Again, pain. But do we think about needs like love, the need to be hugged, the need to be long, the need for esteem, the need for safety? These are all basic human needs. I could spend an hour talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but basically we have to recognize what the human needs are and not forget these, even though it's in our own home or in a residence where we think we're providing all these things. We wouldn't even be caring for them if we didn't love them, or maybe we do. But I want you to know basic needs are important. I have another story to share with you, and I think this is a beautiful story, to be honest with you. I took my young daughter, I'm trying to remember how old she was, but I would say probably 14, 15 years of age, up to visit my mother in the assisted living. And I flew from San Antonio again up north of Boston. And as we were sitting at a table, my mother had a box of Kleenex. And my mother kept taking out a Kleenex and handing it to me. I'd say, "Thank you, Mom." And then she'd say, "Do you want one?" She didn't even know the name of what she was handing me, but she kept handing me Kleenexes. And within a matter of about 20 minutes, I had this mound of Kleenex, and I was starting to get frustrated. And I said to my mother, "Enough. I have enough Kleenex, Mom." My patience was running out. Have you ever felt that? Your patience. I had to be the one to respond and change, but I want you to know who was my teacher. My teacher was my daughter, who leaned over to me and said, "Mom, take the Kleenex. It's all she has left to give you." That Kleenex that was in a frame that looked cement and cold and hard turned around into a gilded look of this box of Kleenex was the only thing truly my mother had left to give me was a Kleenex. She had no money. She had no verbalization she could give me. But as my mother, she wanted to give me something. I don't even think she knew I was her daughter, but she knew she wanted to give me something. I'm going to take you back. And look at that cold, hard look that I had, but with a different frame on it, instead of her just annoying me, giving me a lot of Kleenex with a pile that I didn't need, to the ultimate gift. And the ultimate gift being the gift of Kleenex, my mother's gift to me. I hardly think about Kleenex, to be honest with you, and as I take one out, sometimes my daughter will say to me, Mom, do you have a Kleenex in your purse? I take it out, and it reminds me of my mother. The ultimate gift, it's all she had to give me. And the idea that sometimes children teach us more about what's going on than ourselves. But again, changing the frame on something often changes how we respond. What are the behaviors that you're attempting to deal with? I'm not going to talk about how we deal with each of these behaviors. I'm going to talk with you about these as a total, and we can spend some time and do some future training on this, but I want to validate for you what are some of the behaviors that you may be up against. I meet with people when we're doing training that it might be their first time knowing more about this disease because they've just received a diagnosis, never even thought about what was coming, and just the idea of knowing that some of these behaviors, and remember, these behaviors are a normal part of the disease process. Just like I talked to you about somebody having epilepsy, a seizure is a normal part of that disease process. These are normal behaviors that we are going to have to learn to respond to, reframe, deal, and validate. Yelling, questioning. The questioning can be repeated questioning. When is my daughter coming? When is my daughter coming? Is my daughter here yet? What's taking my daughter so long? What time are we going to have lunch? When they just had lunch. Constant questioning. Swearing. So often people don't have any idea that swearing, their mother had never used a foul word in her entire life. The perfect vocabulary, had never sweared, maybe the preacher's wife that was just perfect. But all of a sudden is coming out with these expletives that they had never even used or heard before, and they are so embarrassed. And yet, I want you to know this is the disease talking. This may be a normal behavior for that person. It has no reflection on you. We'll talk about that. Disrobing, taking off clothes. My mother, I will tell you, always wanted to get in her pajamas. She loved being in her pajamas. I do too. Is that an abnormal behavior? When we talk about unmet needs, I think you're going to see this differently. I was traveling from San Antonio down to Florida a couple of months ago and sat next to a woman on an airplane that told me about her mother and some of her mother's activities. And the behavior that she put on it, her own reaction to the behavior, I should say, was this was a woman who truly learned to reframe and think about things differently. One of those areas that she thought about differently was her mother's hypersexuality. Nobody wants to think about their parents' sexuality. All of us think that we were the Immaculate Conception. Our parents couldn't have possibly have had sex. And yet we become having to deal with our parents' libido and being called into facilities or watching this. Very difficult. And this is just a behavior that is a normal behavior for the disease. It's just how are we going to respond and communicate to it. Resistance with meal, resistance to eating, only wanting sweets, not wanting to chew food, wanting to walk and eat at the same time. These are all behaviors that are normal that we're going to be up against. And not everyone in every situation, but in most cases you're going to see some form of it. Resistance with bathing, very common. Hoarding, stealing, is it really stealing? We're going to look at that in a moment. Pacing, and wandering. These are all behaviors that we're going to have to learn to study together, spend some time and deal with. Sleep difficulties. This might mean they sleep all day, up all night. Wander during the night. Cat napping, not allowing you to sleep at all because these sleep difficulties may be a behavior you're having to deal with for yourself. Seeing people who are not there in the room. And I hope that I have a few minutes at the end of the program to talk with you a little bit about validation and recognizing that we have to validate that this is real to the person. We'll talk back. Repetitive motions, that's this. constant tapping, or doing something all the time, can be very annoying to caregivers, and until we understand that this is an unmet need, very difficult. Hitting and biting. So let's look at the needs and the behaviors together a little bit. Again, remember that today I'm not able to take questions from you live, but as this program is being recorded, if you want to ask any questions, you want to come back or make comments, I want you to feel comfortable to do so. You can send those questions to info@mmlearn.org or write to me directly at mariaw@mmlearn.org. So we're going to look at some needs and behaviors together, and we're going to talk about hitting and biting for just a minute. With hitting and biting, I try to tell our new employees that if someone were to come up to me behind me in a mall, and I'm putting something into the trunk of my car, and they were to come up and startle me, I may either run or I may turn around and try to hit that person just to protect myself. This is a normal human emotion when we have fear, and that's called the fight or flight syndrome. Are we going to hit or are we going to run? For most people who are in their 80s, 70s, 80s, 90 years of age, the opportunity for them to run is minimal. If they're in a wheelchair, they're confined in any way, the opportunity to run is absolutely nil. So how are they going to protect themselves? And they may do that by hitting or biting. It is what we did that elicited the response or the behavior. We may have scared them. If we look at just this one behavior, and that is not scaring someone, one of the things is meeting someone at eye level to talk with them, coming up slowly, not in a hurry, knowing that they may not even recognize who we are. We may be perceived as a stranger in the beginning, having a good tone, a happy face, and we'll talk about communication. But what I want you to understand is the need to protect someone's self may result in the behavior that they have. So in this case, I always like to talk about what are the things that scare me. I can be sitting in my office and have someone walk in late in the evening. It's quiet. I think everybody's gone home, and I have a major startle response. I want you to think about this in another issue. Let's think about trying to help someone that needs to have their belt taken off. We're trying to undress them to get them ready for bed, and they turn around and hit us or they attempt to bite us. Throughout our entire lives, we're taught to protect ourselves. We're told from young children not to let anybody handle our personal parts, that we're supposed to be protective of that. And all of a sudden, somebody's trying to take off my pants, and I have no relationship to what this is. Might I hit? Yes. Might I bite? Is that an abnormal behavior? No. That is somebody protecting themselves. Looking at needs and behavior together is shadowing and pacing. Shadowing is a behavior where someone will follow you with whatever you're doing. I just met a woman who said she can't have 1 minute alone, that if she walks into the kitchen, her husband walks into the kitchen. If she goes to the bathroom, he's in the bathroom with her. If she sits down in a chair, he's sitting right next to her. And all she wants is a little space to herself. I think we've all had that feeling, that we want some space. We want a little time to ourselves. And yet for these folks, this is not an abnormal behavior. The shadowing and pacing may be they don't know what to do. They are at a loss of what to do with their time. Are we fulfilling their time? Are we providing appropriate activities for them? One of those things might be to find something that they actually enjoy doing. And we suggested, and I've heard back from this person, that they had some success, and that was exciting, that this person had been somebody who loved to work in the tool shed. And I didn't suggest heavy nuts and bolts, but the PVC piping that you can screw together, the little pieces that you can buy at any Home Depot or any kind of a hardware store that has the PVC little pieces. That's what the gentleman was given, and she said, I want to thank you, it worked. When I wanted to be alone for a few minutes to get something done in the kitchen, I put these on the table, and he enjoys working with them. I want you to know he may enjoy, just like we said in the beginning, working with them today, but not tomorrow. Maybe this 10 minutes, but not the next 10 minutes. But we have to look at things that we can do, and the need is this person has nothing to do, doesn't know what to do with themselves, and doesn't have the cognitive abilities. We're not getting into anatomy and physiology, but this person doesn't have the cognitive ability to be able to decide what to do for themselves, how to entertain themselves, how to keep themselves busy. We'll talk about pacing in a minute, can reflect many things, but some of that is just boredom and not a feeling of belonging, not knowing what to do. So what makes a behavior a problem? We're saying that these behaviors are normal for the disease, but when does it become a problem? Well, let me give you some examples that people share with me. One of them is that my father or my husband or my wife will not put on her night clothes and go to bed. It's very resistant. It's at the end of the day. The person is tired, they're reactive, and they refuse to remove their clothes and sometimes even become belligerent. And they want them to put on the pajamas. And my question is, why? Why do they need to wear pajamas to bed? They don't. We can make some adaptations. So we said in the beginning, they're not going to change. We have to. Can I change my belief that my husband doesn't have to put on pajamas to rest comfortably in bed? Maybe he'll let me take off the belt so that he won't hurt himself or scratch himself with the belt. But is it necessary? I would say somebody who refuses to remove their clothes to go to bed, that is not a problem behavior. It's just a behavior. How we respond is the issue. Let's look at the behavior of refusal to take medication. Could be a behavioral problem, might not. If it's a multivitamin or a medication that you can call the doctor to have discontinued, because we keep many people with dementia on medications they don't need to be taking anymore. Those are decisions you and your doctor have to make together, the family. But maybe if somebody's fighting not taking cholesterol medication, maybe we don't have to take it anymore. Is it a different story if they need insulin? Yes, that could be very different in the behaviors and their health. So if it's a multivitamin, is it a problem? Maybe not. If it's insulin, maybe so. But we need to engage the entire team when we see any behaviors that we can simplify life, not only for the resident or the person you love, but mostly for you. What we can do to make life easier for you and easier ultimately for the resident or your loved one. Rummaging in the house and going through drawers, as long as there's nothing that is going to hurt the person. You sure don't want to have knives and chemicals and things like that. But if somebody constantly rummages in a sock drawer, is that going to change life? Maybe yes, maybe no for you according to what's in the drawer. Can the drawer be locked? Can the drawer be emptied? Can you fill the drawer with socks? Is it really a problem behavior if it's keeping the person entertained, giving them something to feel like they're doing? That rummaging behavior may not be problematic. Now let's look at another incident, and that would be that of rummaging in another person's room if they live in an assisted living. In an assisted living or a skilled nursing, when a resident goes into another resident's room and starts rummaging through the drawers, that could be a catastrophic reaction. That's something that we have to deal with, and then it is a problematic behavior. Can we reframe things and look at it and say, is this really a problem, or is this just a normal behavior that I can learn to deal with and I can change my response to? This was one also that I heard about that was turning off the thermostat in the house and making the temperature of the house go up to very high degrees. Uncomfortable for the caregiver and not appropriate for the resident with dementia, because we don't want somebody being overheated. Living in San Antonio, this would be a huge problem during the summer months of having someone playing with the thermostat. I want you to understand that, yes, it's a problem if it gets too hot in the house. That's a problematic behavior. But how can we change it? How can we reframe it? One of the things is there are many triggers for people that if they see a thermostat, and I'm sure this would have been my father, because my dad wanted every light turned out in the house. He wanted the fans turned off. He was always trying to save money, save that electricity. A woman recently, I told her that at Marshall's or Ross's or places like Target, they have those picture frames that are kind of like a shadow box effect, that they're big. that if she put that over the thermostat to give it a try and see if the person didn't see the thermostat, they may not turn it off. It's not there to cue them or trigger them that they want to go look at the thermostat or play with the thermostat. It might not be just a thermostat. It might be light switches. It can be anything that triggers a person to do something that they're constantly doing that's affecting you. If you remove the item or remove the cue from them, that can be even a doorknob, sometimes putting something over the door, just a piece of material. If they don't see the doorknob or the lock, they may not want to be triggered by it. It takes a lot of concentration, a lot of thinking, and creative thinking to be able to make a difference in some of the behaviors. But remember, to evaluate, is the behavior a problem, or is the behavior a normal part of the disease that isn't going to affect you or the person with the disease? Behaviors meeting unmet needs. Behaviors equal unmet needs. This is a current philosophy in care, and one that I think makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of evidence to support this. We talked earlier about pacing and wandering. Why does somebody do that? Maybe they're bored. But is it an unmet need that has to do with toileting? Could this person have the urge that they have to urinate and they can't find the toilet anymore? Yes, they might have found it in the morning at 8 o'clock, but at 9 o'clock they might not be able to find the toilet. This is what is happening to the brain is something we could spend a lot of time and have physicians and other folks that are specialists in this explain to you exactly what's happening anatomically and physiologically to the brain. But the bottom line is, I just want you to understand that if somebody is pacing and wandering, the first thing we need to think about are those unmet needs of thirst, toileting, because they can't express to you what they need any longer. So it would mean that if you begin to see this, the first thing we should try is, does this person need to go to the bathroom? The next thing might be with wandering and pacing, are they thirsty? Do we need to get them something to eat? What are those very basic needs? Are they in pain? All those things that were on the list earlier in the program are things we want to look at in regards to unmet needs. I hear a lot about people urinating outside, urinating in the house in a certain spot, urinating in household plants. Again, this is something that deals with a basic human need to go to the bathroom. And yes, it seems to us as an abnormal behavior. For this person, they're meeting their need. We have to look at what can we do, though, to help ourselves if it's a problematic behavior. You sure don't want, when the children come to the house or the grandchildren, for dad to be urinating in front of the grandchildren or to be urinating in household plants. This might mean that you need to start a routine toileting plan and taking the person to the bathroom every hour, every 2 hours, to make sure that these behaviors are something that don't embarrass you or upset your household. So I want you to think always, though, what is the behavior demonstrating in regards to this person's needs? And it's different for everybody and different all the time. Crying and screaming, outbursts, belligerence, hitting. You can't take this personally. We have to go back to the unmet needs. Is it pain? Is it hunger? Is it thirst? Is it not being loved? We know you love them. There's no question you wouldn't be there dealing with this if you didn't. If you're a caregiver in a facility, it's a job that is your ministry or your gift. But I want to tell you, remember back to my mother pulling and pulling on her clothes and being very distracted, was treated with a Tylenol. I'm not talking about drugging people now. I'm talking about meeting basic needs like pain. Because someone has dementia does not mean they are not suffering from pain. They get headaches just like we do. They have arthritis just like everybody else that's their age. They may have pulled a muscle. We have to look at this all the time. Rummaging, going through things. We talked about that a little bit. Is it a problematic behavior or not? What are they looking for? Are they looking for themselves? Are they looking for something to do? Why are they rummaging? Creative thinking. We could do a class on each one of these behaviors and come up with ideas for you. And I even look forward, if you're interested in that, let me know. Write to me, Maria W., at mmlearn.org, and let me know which one of these behaviors or issues you're most interested in learning more about, because we surely have some ideas for you. The environment is so important that you have for the person that you're living with or the person you're caring for in a facility. One of the issues that I find the most troublesome when I do consulting has to do with lighting. These folks need 3 times more light to be able to see than you and I do. And as we age up, and all the degenerative eye diseases that we see only exacerbate the problems that we see with dementia. Think with me for a minute that we think so much about with aging: cataracts, macular degeneration, glaucoma, all the eye conditions, and all of these require a different type of lighting. Sometimes, because they need so much more lighting, we think a little night light in the room might be very relaxing. But instead, this person may need full-blown lighting. Not having the normal lighting that is the outdoor ambient lighting is not always it. Just look at these pictures for a minute and see how difficult it is for you to make out the things in the room. For a person that needs 3 times the amount of light to be able to see what you and I do if we have healthy eyes, this is one area that we can really affect change in. It is very disorienting, very upsetting not to be able to see what you're doing. I feel that in the morning when I don't have my glasses to put on. So I want you to think a lot about the environment. In addition to lighting, I want you to think about a hot room and a cold room, because I get very agitated when I get too warm. I don't think I can ever get too cold, but I sure can get too warm. Are we dressing the person appropriately? Is the environment that they're in have the appropriate temperatures? You and your spouse or your father, mother, loved one, you and the person you're caring for in a facility may have very different body needs temperatures, how you respond. You might be cold all the time, and somebody else might be hot. If you put a sweater on a person in the morning because it's chilly, they may not remember, and they can't, to take off the sweater. And so as they're beginning to sweat or they're beginning to get agitated, think about their body temperature. Think about maybe taking off the sweater. It's too warm for that now. Maybe it's putting on a sweater if it's getting a little bit chilly. When you begin to see people layer clothing, that has many reasons why they do that. But if you begin to frame these things, not in a behavior, not them being obstinate, not them being difficult, but maybe that they have an unmet need that we can meet, putting a new frame on it will change how you respond. They cannot make the difference. They cannot cognitively think through that. They have lost that function because of the disease, and we have to do that for them without being condescending and without making them feel that they're not caring for themselves at all anymore. It's a task. I can't think of anything more important than having a routine in people's lives to depend on. And this is one of the biggest mistakes we make with people with dementia, is sometimes we think we're doing them such a favor to keep changing things up every day. These are folks that in their minds, if we have a routine, tend to settle in and be a little bit calmer if there is a routine every day that isn't broken. That's not possible, even in facilities, 100% of the time. That's not possible if you have to go to a doctor on an emergency and you have to take your loved one with you, or you have to pick up a prescription and you have to take them out unexpectedly to the doctors or to the pharmacy. But as much routine as you can put in someone's life, the greater the opportunity to have a reduction in the number of behaviors. That routine needs to consist of eating times that are consistent, that is in toileting times that are consistent, opportunities to lay down and rest so that they don't become overtired. And the same activities over and over many times are better than changing up the activities. Remember, this is a disease that progresses, and as I said, where they were yesterday won't be where they are tomorrow, so what they might have enjoyed doing tomorrow, they can't later on in the disease. A great example of this is they want to help and feel useful still. Those needs to be long and to have esteem, so giving them washcloths to fold, having them help you match socks when they can still do that. But when you give them a task that they're no longer capable of doing, that only frustrates the individual. So we have to learn to change those, to meet them where they're at, always meeting them where they're at and putting a frame on. What can I give them to do that will make them feel successful in a routine environment? This is a program that I do for caregivers. I do this for family members. I do this for our supervisory staff about how we communicate. And I just want to share this for 1 second. This was a study that was done out of Princeton University. And it said that we have 3 ways that people understand and communicate. And those are with words, our tone, and our body language. I'm going to give you an example about this. But I would say to you, out of 100%, I've talked a lot today, and you've heard a lot of words. What percentage of the communication that I gave you was with words? What was with my tone? And what was body language? This might surprise you a little bit. 7% of communication is with words. Most people make this like 70 or 80%. 23% is in our tone, and our body language is 70%. I'm going to give you 2 examples on this to help you a little bit in communicating with folks with dementia. All the words that you have, let's take this one. For the English language, the word okay. If I were to ask most of you, what does okay mean? Think for a second, what does that word, those 2 letters of the alphabet mean? Okay. All right, it's okay with me. Yes, that'll be fine. Now let me change my tone and say, okay. Did I change the meaning of the 2 letters? Okay is good. Okay, or okay, I've totally changed the communication of what I've just said to you. I've communicated many different things. The first, okay, it's all right. The second one, I'm not sure, I got a question. The third one makes you think it's not okay at all. Add a little bit of body language to it and put my hands on my hips, and I have changed everything. I don't even have to say anything. Crossing my arms and looking stern at you can be so frustrating that you know already, and what's coming out of my mouth may be completely different. 70% is what we communicate with body language, and if we could remember this in dealing with people with dementia, that 70% of what we're saying to them will not be there from our words at all. It's going to be from what they're seeing on our face and the tone we're using. If we have, you don't have to hurry, Dad. You don't have to hurry, but you have your hand on your hip and you look like you're in a hurry. This creates tension. It's learning to use your body to relax to make them relax. They cannot change. You have to. Putting a smile on, even when you're frustrated, will have less chance of exacerbating a problem and having a catastrophic response. So your tone and your body language is going to account, think about this, for 93% of the communication with your family member. And if that's the only thing you take away today is changing your tone and changing your body language to make someone feel accepted and that you're not angry, that may solve a lot of your problems. So it's just some thoughts on this. We do a whole lecture on communication. So now what about you? Yes, you. When I said, I don't have dementia, but it's driving me crazy, I can tell you, having been a person that has been in this field in long-term care for almost 15 years and nursing for 40, no bigger shock came in my life than dealing with my mom with dementia. Taking care of somebody else's mother seems so easy to teach. Not so for me. When it was my mother and I had to deal with the behaviors and all of my own feelings and my own loss, yes, what about me? What about you? What are some of the common thoughts of caregivers? This is interesting because there's so many responses by the care receiver to our actions. And these are some common things that are in literature. Does she hate me? Does he hate me now? Did he always hate me? Did my father not like me? Did my husband really not want to be married to me? Have I upset him? What did I do to upset him? Could all of these behaviors be about past problems or issues that we never resolved that are now just coming out? I've never had enough patience, and now I have even less. Any of these thoughts in your head, any of these thoughts pass your mind? Did I just not know this side of the person I loved? Was this someone that I just never knew? Why didn't I deal with the issues long ago so they would not be coming out now? I think about mother-daughter relationships, how complex those are. Husband and wife, all of our relationships are complex. Being a child that's now in a parenting role, What are other people, what are the staff thinking about me? What do they think about us as a family when my dad is using such horrible profanity and showing his genitals? What about when he's trying to have sex with one of the other residents in the facility? All these abnormal behaviors, how does that reflect on us? If I could only give you an idea of understanding that this is the most horrible of diseases that destroys a brain, that really is not reflective, we don't think of all of these things. This is not about them. This is not the person you knew. This is not about you when it comes to their responses. But that's hard to deal with, and we'll talk more. Because it deals with guilt, and more guilt. Of any disease that I've ever worked with, I've never heard as much guilt as I hear from family members that have someone that they love with this disease. I was a pastoral care nurse for a year, many years ago, and I went into a home on a visit, and one of the women said to me that I went to visit, and she had her husband, and this woman was working so hard, so hard to keep her husband at home. And when I asked her how things were going and did she think she was going to need some additional help, and she said, oh my, if Nancy Reagan can do this, I can do this. I found this to be pretty common. People think that other people are doing this so easily, why can't I? First of all, Nancy Reagan would tell you Nancy Reagan had a lot of help. Nancy Reagan had a lot of money and tremendous help. She was not doing this alone, and I guarantee you she was getting a good night's sleep. And if she wasn't, it wasn't because there wasn't somebody there to help her. I see people who can't get any sleep at all because their loved one is up all night trying to get out of the house. Should you feel guilty? Should you feel like you can do it all? I can tell you no, but do I know those emotions are still there? I do. Guilt is not limited to those caring for a loved one at home. I can't stress this enough. When family members admit their loved one to a nursing home or to an assisted living, the guilt does not go away. Sometimes the guilt is increased. They feel like they failed because they couldn't keep the person at home anymore. I am here to tell you I support you if you want to keep and can keep that person at home that you love for as long as possible. You have my support. You have truly, I'm proud of you, but I also want to know you. I'm equally as proud of you. I don't have any sense that anything is wrong when you say this person needs more care than I have left to give, and we need to do an admission. Either way, this is a disease that makes it so difficult on the caregiver, and guilt is there. Losing patience means failure. No, it means you're human. We all lose our patience. I think about the dear little person with the Kleenex trying so hard to give me all she had left to give me, and I lost my patience. And let me guarantee you that was not the only time I lost my patience. It was not the only time my sister lost her patience with me. This is a trying disease for everybody, not just for the person with the disease, for you too. I know that he or she can't help it, but I can't take it anymore. And that is true. There are times that you cannot and you need help. What are some of the strategies that we can do to reduce the behavior? Well, we talked about our tone and we talked about how we communicate. A gentle, reassuring touch. Some people with dementia don't want to be touched. Clear, simple messages. Don't look for long answers. Don't expect people to be able to recall, even if they could yesterday. Simple yes or no's sometimes are just enough, and you have to settle for that. Simplified decision making. When I go into homes or into facilities that I see closets filled with clothing and sweaters, and the person is putting on layers of clothing, or it becomes a battle of what to put on, limit the clothing. Only leave one, maybe two outfits, and let the person select. But to have 50, I have trouble in my own closet in the morning getting up and getting dressed and deciding. Simplify your life, simplify their life. Focus and provide tasks, as we said, that they can perform. Don't give them things that are too technical, too hard. If they can't count money anymore, that's a first sign. That's early on. We're talking about it may be too hard to fold washcloths. What can they do? Find something simple they can do to still feel they're assisting you. Demonstrate visually what you're trying to say. If you want somebody to put on a sweater, put on your sweater. and let them put on theirs. If you're getting ready to leave and they're going to go with you, it may be getting their purse and you getting your purse, and that might be just enough of a trigger. Of anything you shouldn't do, it's argue, because I want you to know there is no winner in arguing. You have to live in their world. They can't live in yours. This is part of what we talked about as being validation therapy. It is saying that if somebody says to you, I'm waiting for, my mother used to, and this is a perfect example, my mother used to say to me, I'm waiting for my mother to come. And if I had said to my mother, Mom, your mother died before I was born. Your mother is dead. This can create grief and bereavement. They're living in a different world. One of my things to dissuade would be simply, instead of arguing that my mother's mother is dead, my grandmother is dead, is just to say to her a simple question: is she beautiful? Will I know her when she comes? A yes or no. I can't wait for her to get here. I've had people say to me about this arguing issue and about meeting people where they're at, I can't lie. I'm taught not to lie. I want you to know, in their world, this isn't lying. In their world, they're living in a completely different place than you are, and you're not lying. If some people want to call it therapeutic fibbing, that's fine with me. You can call it whatever you want. I call it validation therapy. There's a lot of research on validation, but we don't do reality orientation any longer with people with dementia. Why would we do that? Their minds cannot accept that. So it's meeting them where they're at, communicating with them where they are. A moment in time when somebody is waiting for their baby, or they can't find their baby. This is somebody who's 90 years old who's saying, I can't find my baby. I can say, relax, the baby's all right, I'll look for the baby, I'll bring you the baby. And then if you redirect the person to something else, they will forget. It is a learning process. There's so much to learn. I just want you to know there are tools there for you, and this isn't easy, but don't argue. Even if you can't understand what they're trying to say, listen intently and search for meaning, because you might pick up a few words, and they're just going to care that you're even willing to listen and you're not ignoring and frustrated with them. If you scrunch up your eyes and you're looking at them like, I don't get what you're saying, instead of smiling at them and listening as though you understand everything, sometimes that's all it takes, is that they feel like they're being heard. Look for patterns that provoke behaviors and try to get rid of them. One of those is the thermostat, of turning up the thermostat, putting something over the thermostat. You can go underneath and change it. Eliminate an overstimulating environment. There are two kinds of environments that are too boring, that nothing is going on. Another one that we talk about is an overstimulating, and this one bothers me, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't have cognitive impairment at this time. But I want you to know that if I hear a radio and a television, the phone ringing, the dog barking, and a child calling to me asking me for something, or my husband asking for something, I can feel overstimulated. And it can create in me a surge, and I can get angry. It just will come up, and it's like, what's wrong here? I don't even know what has made me get so frustrated. It was a simple question from my husband or my child, but it's all the other stimulation. We need to recognize and slow things down. Close off areas of the house that are a problem, and just get those doors locked so that somebody can't go in. Put something over the doorknob. Avoid arguing. Avoid looking angry or agitated, raising your voice. Sounding like a parent or a drill sergeant does not create and change behavior. Reprimanding or punishing has no value. They will not remember. They cannot change their behavior. Again, only you can. Asking questions that require memory to answer. No. Yes or no is simpler. Hurrying the individual is only going to create more resistance. And putting yourself at risk, I tell people all the time, avoid doing that. There's nothing wrong with calling for help. Even if you need to call the police, I want you to know this is not a statement about your loved one or a failure on your part. This is protecting you so you're sure that you can take care of them when they need you the most. Coping strategies, some of these just make me angry to read, to be honest with you. Sometimes I see coping strategies and think, oh my gosh, what are they thinking for these people? But if I can give you these, and I hope that they will make sense, one is, remember this is not about you, and don't take the behavior personally. If someone is talking to you and saying, I hate you, I don't want you, I want my husband, and you are the husband, this is not about you personally. This is the disease. Sometimes nothing you try will work. Don't blame yourself. Blame the disease. You are not responsible for being a magician. I want you to understand that this takes a lot of work. Please don't blame yourself when your processes that you think will work don't. We're all in this together. Explain the situation to other persons. If I was with the child and no one had ever seen anybody have epilepsy, I would explain that this was part of a disease, not that somebody was having a tantrum. Do the same thing with dementia. Even if you have to leave the room for a few minutes and take a few deep breaths, some people say this doesn't work. I'll tell you, I even have to do this at work. Leave the room for a few minutes, take a deep breath, do a short exercise, lean down, touch your toes, stretch, put your arms up over your head, give yourself just a couple minutes of break. That internet chat room just amazed me because it, even for me, brought back remembrances and memories of my mother, things that I had done or felt. And I have to tell you, even to this day, it helped me to see, boy, I was not alone. And even though I'm a professional, it doesn't mean that I don't have some of these feelings. Be realistic. You cannot do this alone. How do you find help? How do you afford help? How do you allow someone to help you? What I'm going to say to you is I can't give you money. I told you I can't come take care of your loved one myself. But I can tell you you can't do this alone, and you're going to have to enlist the help of other people. I just read something very interesting called the Villages effect and how neighborhoods are helping family members. But the problem here is most of us don't know how to accept help. And I'm a person who suffers from this a lot. And there's a lot of anger there when you have someone that you want to have help you, like a sibling that should be responsible, or a brother or a sister of a husband and wife. If someone shows you who they are and they're not going to come help, believe them, don't stay angry. Don't give up all your time wasted on trying to make someone do something they can't do. Find someone who will help you. And I'm going to explain something to you that I think was very helpful to me when I was a pastoral care nurse. I found that people, and I myself, have a lot of difficulty getting people or allowing people into my life to help. And one of the things I want to share with you is that sometimes we think we don't want to impose if we need medication, we need food picked up, we need some Depends because our loved one may be incontinent and we're out of those supplies, and someone comes to the house and says, what can I do to help? Or you want to call someone to help, but you don't have cash in the house. You don't want to say to your next door neighbor, could you run up to H-E-B or to Walmart or to Walgreens and pick up some Depends for me when you don't even have cash? It looks like you're trying to mooch off of them. A great idea is for you to buy gift cards that you could give to the person and say, there's plenty of money on this because anybody can use it. Could you pick up something for me? This is a great way for pharmaceutical items, food items, almost anything can be handled. This is just one idea for you in getting help. We have lots of other ideas of enlisting help from your church and others, and you might think they are not going to help me. I've tried that. It won't work. We want to help you even more because without accepting help, you're not going to make this all by yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's too hard for those of us that work in this industry and work in dementia. We get to go home after 8 hours, and we're tired. We recognize that you are too. We want to give you some little ideas of ways of not feeling like you're imposing, but allowing someone to help you a bit. Barriers to accepting help is being afraid to leave someone with a stranger or a family member that doesn't understand the disease. We can help you with that. We have so many programs on understanding this disease. But I also want to encourage you to look at the different agencies in your communities and know respite help is available even in rural areas. I've become very aware of that through some of the AAAs. Another thing is adult daycare. It doesn't mean that you have to place someone into a facility. Is the resident or your family member going to want to go? Probably not. But do you need it? Yes. Do you need to take care of you? Absolutely. Do you know what you want? This is the biggest thing for all of us in life, not just those folks who are dealing with dementia. Sometimes we have people who want to help and are willing to help and could help, and we're just too tired to accept it. We don't even know what to do. What we really want, and I want you to understand this more than anything else, because this is what we all want, is we want to have this all be a dream. We want for this disease to be cured. We want to go back to our life for the way it was, or we want to plan for the life that we know that we're never going to have. I know this is hard, but we want to help you. It's not easy. You can't do this on your own. There's too many resources available, but there's no perfect answer. Must take care of yourself, have your own physical exam, take your own medication, try to reduce your own stress, even if it's just through breathing. Affirm to yourself how you're handling this is probably not perfect, and it's not, but it sure is good. You're doing it. You're doing the best that you can. Someone to talk to, most of all, someone who isn't going to judge you, not a sibling, not somebody who has better ideas on how you ought to be doing it that has never done this before. Find someone, a clergyman, a doctor, a friend, but somebody who just accepts you for who you are. Most of all, I want you to know education. The more you learn and understand this disease, the more you're going to be able to understand how to cope and deal with all that is around this and all that surrounds this horrible disease called dementia. This is my mother. This is my mother in a Alzheimer's dementia facility. Ben Franklin came that day to visit. I remember how guilty I felt putting her in that facility, how I felt I had let her down. And I want you to know there was more activity and more routine than I could have ever have afforded her. This is not an unhappy-looking woman. She had a lot of behaviors, a lot of issues. This is the Kleenex woman. This is the one who had, that's all she had to give me. I ask you one thing, be gentle with yourself. You deserve it. Just, no matter what, be gentle with yourself. Join us again soon. I look forward to being with you. Bye-bye.